Have you ever wondered what God truly looks for in a soul that longs for heaven? Have you ever felt the desire for holiness, yet feared that you might not be strong, pure, or extraordinary enough? And have you ever asked yourself, in the quiet of your heart, what Jesus actually requires, not from saints in books, but from you? There is a gentle answer to this question, one that Saint Thérèse of Lisieux spent her entire life discovering. It is not an answer built on fear, pressure, or spiritual achievement. It is an answer rooted in simplicity, trust, and love, the very heart of the little way. Heaven is not reached by climbing higher, but by becoming smaller before God. Saint Thérèse of Lisieux. Subscribe if you wish to walk this little way with us and learn what truly draws a soul toward heaven. Saint Thérèse of Lisieux explained that Jesus does not require greatness in the way the world understands it. He does not ask for extraordinary strength, perfect virtue, or heroic accomplishments. Instead, he looks for something far quieter, a soul that dares to trust him completely. She wrote with striking clarity, "What pleases Jesus is to see me love my littleness and my poverty, to trust blindly in his mercy." This sentence alone reveals everything Jesus requires from a soul that seeks heaven. Not confidence in oneself, but confidence in him. Not self-mastery, but surrender. Not spiritual perfection, but spiritual childhood. Imagine a child standing at the foot of a steep staircase. The steps are too high. The child knows she cannot climb them alone. Instead of turning away, she lifts her eyes and stretches out her arms. She does not argue, she does not negotiate. She simply trusts that she will be lifted. This, Thérèse believed, is the soul Jesus desires. Heaven, in her understanding, is not a reward for the strong, but a gift for the trusting. Jesus requires a heart that knows it cannot reach heaven on its own, and therefore allows itself to be carried. Thérèse herself struggled deeply with this truth. She longed for heaven intensely, yet she saw her own weakness, impatience, and limitations. Instead of despairing, she made a radical discovery. Her weakness was not an obstacle, it was the path. She wrote, "It is my weakness that gives me boldness. Boldness to approach God, boldness to hope for heaven, boldness to believe that love, not merit, opens eternal doors." Jesus, Thérèse explained, requires humility, not humiliation, but truth. The truth that you are small, the truth that you need him, the truth that without grace you can do nothing. This truth does not push God away. It draws him closer. Picture Thérèse in the quiet of the convent, kneeling in the chapel as evening falls. The candles flicker softly. Her prayer is not long. Her heart is not overflowing with emotion. Yet she rests there with trust, offering herself as she is. In that simple posture, heaven feels near, not because of effort, but because of love. This is the beginning of understanding what Jesus requires from a soul that seeks heaven, a heart that trusts more than it strives, that loves more than it proves, that surrenders more than it controls. In the next block, we will go deeper into the first requirement Saint Thérèse reveals, the essential attitude without which the soul cannot move toward heaven at all. To understand what Jesus truly requires from a soul that seeks heaven, Saint Thérèse of Lisieux insists we begin with the first and most essential attitude, trust. Not trust in oneself, not trust in spiritual progress, but a deep, childlike trust in the mercy and love of God. Thérèse believed that without trust, even the most disciplined spiritual life becomes sterile. She wrote, "It is trust and nothing but trust that must lead us to love." This statement is radical. It overturns the idea that heaven is reached through effort alone. Instead, it reveals that heaven opens to the soul that dares to believe God is good, even toward the weak. Trust, in Thérèse's understanding, is not naive optimism. It is a deliberate choice to place your entire spiritual weight on God's heart rather than your own abilities. It is the refusal to measure yourself constantly, the refusal to keep score, the refusal to approach God with calculation instead of confidence. Imagine a child crossing a narrow bridge while holding a parent's hand. The child does not analyze the structure of the bridge. She does not test its strength. She does not ask for guarantees. She simply holds on and walks. This is what Jesus requires first. Thérèse noticed that many souls desire heaven but hesitate to trust. They believe they must first become worthy. They delay hope until they feel holy enough. They wait to trust God until they feel stronger, purer, or more faithful. But Thérèse gently dismantles this illusion. She writes, "Jesus does not wait for us to be perfect to love us. He waits only for trust. When a soul trusts, it stops negotiating with God. It stops saying, 'If I improve, then you may love me.' Instead, it says, 'Because you love me, I will walk toward you.' Trust changes the entire spiritual posture of the soul. Prayer becomes simpler, failure becomes less frightening, weakness becomes less shameful. The soul stops hiding and starts resting. Picture Thérèse sitting quietly, hands folded, eyes lowered, offering God not her achievements, but her confidence. Her prayer is not intense, it is peaceful. She is not trying to reach heaven by force. She is letting heaven draw her gently upward. Jesus requires this trust because trust opens the heart, and only an open heart can receive grace. Without trust, the soul closes in on itself. With trust, the soul expands toward God. This is why Thérèse teaches that trust is not optional, it is foundational. Without it, the soul remains focused on itself. With it, the soul becomes centered on God. As you reflect, ask yourself quietly, do I trust God more than I trust my own efforts? Do I approach Him with confidence or with fear? Do I believe His mercy is greater than my weakness? Your answers reveal where your journey toward heaven truly begins. After trust, Saint Thérèse of Lisieux reveals the second requirement Jesus asks of a soul that seeks heaven, humility. But not the kind of humility that humiliates, crushes, or diminishes the heart. Thérèse speaks of a humility that is peaceful, liberating, and filled with quiet joy, the humility of spiritual littleness. She wrote, "Humility consists in recognizing the truth of what we are. Nothing more, nothing less." For Thérèse, humility was not thinking poorly of oneself, but thinking truthfully. It was the gentle acceptance of one's smallness without bitterness or fear. A soul that seeks heaven must stop pretending to be strong before God and instead stand before Him exactly as it is. Jesus does not require a soul to appear impressive. He requires it to be real. Imagine a child standing before a loving parent. The child does not rehearse her words. She does not hide her clumsiness. She does not exaggerate her goodness. She simply exists, openly, honestly, freely. This simplicity is what Jesus seeks. Thérèse discovered that many souls struggle with humility because they confuse it with failure. They think admitting weakness will distance them from God. But Thérèse discovered the opposite. Humility attracts God's tenderness. She wrote with clarity, "The smaller one becomes, the more Jesus lowers Himself to that soul." This is the mystery of the little way. Humility is the soul's way of making space for God. Pride fills the heart with the self. Humility empties the heart so God may enter. Picture Thérèse walking quietly through the convent, aware of her impatience, her sensitivity, her limits. She does not hide them. She does not dramatize them. She simply brings them to Jesus with confidence. Her humility is calm, not anxious, honest, not harsh. This is the humility Jesus requires. A soul that seeks heaven must abandon the need to impress God. It must stop measuring itself against others. It must stop demanding perfection before love. Instead, it must accept its place, small, dependent, and deeply loved. Thérèse teaches that humility protects the soul from discouragement. When you accept your littleness, failure no longer surprises you. And when failure no longer surprises you, it no longer steals your peace. The soul remains steady, gentle, and hopeful. This is why humility is not heavy, it is light. A humble soul rests. A proud soul strives. Jesus asks for humility because humility allows Him to be Savior. A soul that believes it can save itself has no need for mercy. But a soul that knows its need opens wide the door to grace. Ask yourself quietly, do I accept my littleness or do I fight it? Do I bring my weakness to God or hide it? Do I rest in truth or struggle to appear strong? Saint Thérèse assures us, heaven is not reserved for the impressive, but for the humble, for those who dare to be small and trust that God delights in lifting them. After trust and humility, Saint Thérèse of Lisieux reveals a third requirement Jesus asks of a soul that seeks heaven: purity of intention. This is one of the most delicate and misunderstood teachings of the Little Way. It is not about moral perfection or flawless motives, but about doing everything for love alone. Thérèse wrote, "It is love alone that gives value to our actions." In this single sentence, she explains what Jesus looks for far more than external success or visible holiness. "Thou soul may do many good things and yet remain far from heaven if its heart is divided. And a soul may do very little, very quietly, very imperfectly, yet draw close to heaven, if love is its only aim." Purity of intention means this: you act not to be admired, not to feel holy, not to prove your worth, not to calm your conscience, but simply to please God. This requirement is subtle because it touches the interior life, not the exterior. No one sees it. No one applauds it. And that is precisely why Jesus loves it. Imagine a small moment Thérèse lived daily. She performs a task no one notices: sweeping a corridor, folding laundry, setting a table. There is no recognition, no gratitude, perhaps even criticism. In that moment, the temptation arises: why am I doing this? Does it matter? And Thérèse answers quietly in her heart: for love, for you, Jesus. This is purity of intention. Jesus does not require grand sacrifices from a soul that seeks heaven. He requires a heart that chooses love in the smallest circumstances, even when love feels hidden, unappreciated, or unnoticed. Thérèse understood that impurity of intention creeps in when the soul begins to seek itself, when it acts to feel successful, when it measures its spiritual progress, when it looks for signs of approval, even from God. But love does not calculate, love does not compare, love does not demand results. Pure intention frees the soul from spiritual anxiety. It no longer asks, am I doing enough? It asks only, am I loving? Picture a child offering a small gift, a drawing, a flower, a clumsy gesture, not because it is impressive, but because love compelled it. The parent does not measure the gift, they receive the love. This is how Jesus receives the soul. Saint Thérèse teaches that heaven opens to those who live this way, not because they accumulate merit, but because they live in love. And love is the very life of heaven. Ask yourself gently, why do I do what I do? Do I seek God, or the feeling of being spiritual? Do I love, or do I measure? The soul that seeks heaven must learn to act quietly, simply, lovingly, without needing to be seen. After trust, humility, and purity of intention, Saint Thérèse of Lisieux reveals a fourth requirement Jesus asks of a soul that seeks heaven: the acceptance of weakness without discouragement. This teaching stands at the very center of her spiritual genius, because it transforms the way the soul understands failure, limitation, and imperfection. Thérèse did not fear weakness, she feared discouragement. She wrote, "I am content to feel myself weak and little." These words are not resignation, they are freedom. Thérèse understood that Jesus does not require a soul to be strong, but to remain peaceful in its weakness. The soul that accepts its fragility without despair stays close to God's heart. Discouragement, in Thérèse's view, is the moment when the soul turns inward instead of upward. It is not the fall that distances the soul from heaven, but the sadness, frustration, and self-focus that follow the fall. Jesus does not withdraw because of weakness. He draws near. It is the soul that pulls away when it believes its weakness has disqualified it from love. Imagine a child learning to walk. She stumbles repeatedly. She falls. She scrapes her knee. Yet she looks up, expecting to be lifted, not rejected. The fall does not discourage her, because love is certain. This is the posture Jesus requires. Thérèse discovered that many souls desire heaven, but are constantly discouraged by their imperfections. They try, they fail, and then they retreat inward, ashamed and tired. But Thérèse teaches that every failure is an invitation, not to despair, but to trust more deeply. She wrote, When I fall, I rise at once and throw myself into the arms of Jesus. Notice the movement, not analysis, not self-criticism, not delay, but immediate return. This is crucial. Accepting weakness does not mean approving of sin. It means refusing to let imperfection steal hope. It means believing that God's mercy is more stable than your efforts. A soul that accepts its weakness remains light, flexible, and humble. A soul that fights its weakness becomes rigid, anxious, and tired. Picture Thérèse in her cell late at night. The day has not gone as she hoped. She was distracted in prayer. She felt irritation. She did not love perfectly. Instead of rehearsing her failures, she lifts her heart quietly and says, "Jesus, this is all I have to give you today, my poverty. Take it." This prayer pleases him deeply. Jesus requires a soul that seeks heaven to remain confident even after failure, not confident in itself, but confident in his mercy. Discouragement closes the heart. Confidence opens it. Ask yourself gently, how do I respond to my weaknesses? Do I grow bitter or childlike? Do I withdraw or return? Do I punish myself or trust God more? Saint Thérèse assures us, heaven is not reserved for the flawless, but for the trusting. The soul that remains hopeful in weakness walks steadily toward heaven, carried not by strength, but by love. After trust, humility, pure intention, and peaceful acceptance of weakness, Saint Thérèse of Lisieux reveals the fifth requirement Jesus asks of a soul that seeks heaven: perseverance in small acts of love. This requirement is quiet, hidden, and easily overlooked. Yet it is one of the most decisive elements of the little way. Thérèse firmly believed that heaven is reached not through isolated moments of fervor, but through faithful love repeated day after day. She wrote, "Great deeds are forbidden me, so I must practice small virtues." In this sentence, she reveals a profound truth. Constancy matters more than intensity. Jesus does not ask a soul to feel inspired every day. He asks it to remain faithful. Small acts of love are the language of perseverance. They are the simple decisions to love when nothing feels extraordinary, when prayer feels dry, when others are difficult, when the soul feels unnoticed or tired. Imagine Thérèse beginning another ordinary day in the convent. The bell rings. The routine repeats. Nothing new, nothing exciting. And yet, within this repetition, she chooses again. To smile instead of withdraw, to listen instead of judge, to serve instead of complain, to trust instead of resist. This is perseverance. It is not dramatic, it is not visible, it does not attract admiration, but it shapes the soul quietly, steadily, irrevocably. Thérèse taught that every small act done with love becomes an eternal seed. Sweeping a floor, offering patience, holding the tongue, showing kindness. These acts seem insignificant, but when repeated faithfully, they form the soul into a dwelling place fit for heaven. Jesus requires this perseverance because love must become a habit, not a moment. A soul that seeks heaven must learn to love not only when it feels easy, but when love feels costly, hidden, or unrewarded. Thérèse warned against the temptation of inconsistency, the desire to do great things occasionally while neglecting daily fidelity. She believed that heaven opens more readily to the soul that loves a little every day than to the soul that loves greatly only when inspired. Picture a small candle burning quietly in a dark room. It does not flare dramatically. It simply stays lit, hour after hour. That steady flame is perseverance in love. Ask yourself gently, do I seek emotional intensity or faithful love? Do I wait to love when I feel inspired, or do I choose love in the ordinary? Do I abandon small efforts because they feel insignificant? Saint Thérèse answers clearly, nothing done for love is insignificant. Every act of perseverance draws the soul closer to heaven. After perseverance in small acts of love, Saint Thérèse of Lisieux reveals the sixth requirement Jesus asks of a soul that seeks heaven: confidence in God's mercy until the very end. This confidence is not emotional optimism. It is a deliberate, unwavering choice to trust God's heart, even when everything feels dark, uncertain, or fragile. Thérèse lived this confidence intensely. especially in the final period of her life. When suffering, dryness, and interior darkness surrounded her, she did not retreat into fear. She leaned more deeply into mercy. She wrote, "Even if I had committed all possible sins, I would still go with confidence, my heart broken with sorrow, and throw myself into the arms of Jesus." This sentence reveals what Jesus truly requires. Not a soul without struggle, but a soul that refuses to stop trusting. Confidence in mercy means believing that God's love does not fluctuate with your condition. It means trusting Him when prayer feels empty, when faith feels fragile, when emotions feel absent, and when the future feels unclear. It is the confidence that God's tenderness is more stable than your inner state. Many souls desire heaven, but they fear the moments of darkness along the way. They worry that dryness, doubt, or weakness means they are failing. Thérèse teaches the opposite. These moments are often the greatest opportunities to trust. Imagine a child walking at night, unable to see the path clearly. Fear arises not because the parent is absent, but because visibility is limited. The child who trusts continues walking, holding the hand she cannot fully see. This is confidence in mercy. Thérèse knew spiritual darkness intimately. Near the end of her life, she experienced profound interior trial, a sense of absence, temptation to discouragement, and a painful awareness of her own fragility. Yet she never stopped trusting. She did not demand clarity. She did not ask for reassurance. She simply remained. This remaining is what Jesus requires. Confidence until the end means you do not abandon trust when consolation disappears. You do not reinterpret God as distant when tenderness feels hidden. You do not change your image of God based on your emotions. Confidence says, "Even now He loves me. Even here He is near. Even in this I am carried." Thérèse believed that the soul's final act before heaven is not understanding, it is trust. And this trust must be practiced long before the end. It must become a habit of the heart. Ask yourself gently, how do I respond to spiritual dryness? Do I panic or do I trust? Do I assume God is displeased or do I remain confident in His mercy? Jesus requires this confidence because heaven is entered not by certainty but by surrender. A soul that trusts until the end walks steadily even in darkness because it knows it is loved. After trust, humility, purity of intention, acceptance of weakness, perseverance in small acts of love, and confidence in mercy until the end, Saint Thérèse of Lisieux reveals what gathers all these requirements into a single interior movement. This is the seventh requirement Jesus asks of a soul that seeks heaven: total abandonment to love. For Thérèse, abandonment was not resignation. It was not passivity. It was not giving up. It was placing the whole weight of one's life into the hands of God with peace. She wrote, "To abandon oneself into the arms of Jesus, that is all." In these words, Thérèse summarizes the entire little way. Abandonment means no longer negotiating with God, no longer calculating outcomes, no longer asking, "Is this enough?" No longer fearing what tomorrow may bring. It is the soul's final act of trust, and also its daily posture. Imagine a small child falling asleep in the arms of a parent. The child does not know what tomorrow holds. She does not plan, she does not prepare, she rests. That rest is not ignorance, it is confidence. This is what Jesus asks. Thérèse discovered that many souls desire heaven but resist abandonment. They trust partially. They surrender selectively. They give God certain areas of life, but keep others guarded. But heaven is entered by a heart that gives everything, even its uncertainty, even its fear, even its future. Abandonment does not mean the absence of effort. It means the absence of anxiety. A soul that abandons itself still prays, still loves, still struggles, still falls, but it no longer believes that its own effort determines the outcome. It allows God to be God. Picture Thérèse during her final months, physically weak, emotionally tested, spiritually dry. She does not demand understanding. She does not seek reassurance. She simply repeats interiorly, "My God, I trust you. Do with me what you will." This is abandonment. Jesus requires this from a soul that seeks heaven because heaven itself is eternal abandonment, eternal trust, eternal rest, eternal belonging. A soul cannot enter heaven while still clinging to control. Abandonment gathers every previous requirement. Trust becomes complete. Humility becomes peaceful. Purity of intention becomes effortless. Weakness becomes accepted. Perseverance becomes steady. Mercy becomes the only hope. All fear dissolves. Ask yourself quietly, what am I still holding tightly? Where do I resist resting in God? What future do I try to control instead of entrusting? Saint Thérèse teaches that heaven begins the moment the soul stops holding itself and allows God to hold everything. When a soul lives in trust, humility, purity of intention, peaceful acceptance of weakness, perseverance in small acts of love, confidence in mercy, and total abandonment to love, something profound happens. Heaven begins quietly within the soul itself. Saint Thérèse of Lisieux believed that heaven is not only a destination after death, but a direction of the heart, a way of living already turned toward God. She wrote with serene certainty, "I am not dying, I am entering life." This was not poetic exaggeration. It was the expression of a soul already resting in God. A soul that seeks heaven, as Thérèse understood it, is not tense, anxious, or obsessed with spiritual achievement. It is simple, light, trusting, free. Such a soul no longer measures itself constantly. It no longer fears weakness. It no longer struggles to impress God. It lives with quiet confidence, knowing that love is enough. Imagine Thérèse in the final days of her life. Her body is weak. Her breath is short. Consolations are gone. Yet her heart is peaceful. She is not clinging to her past efforts. She is not reviewing her sacrifices. She is not calculating merit. She is resting entirely in the mercy of God. This is what Jesus requires from a soul that seeks heaven, a heart already leaning toward eternity through love. Heaven, in Thérèse's vision, is not the reward for those who tried hardest, but the home of those who trusted most. It opens not to self-sufficiency, but to surrender, not to fear, but to confidence, not to control, but to abandonment. A soul shaped by the little way carries heaven into daily life. It loves without needing recognition. It serves without seeking results. It prays without pressure. It suffers without despair. It hopes without fear. And in doing so, it becomes transparent to God's presence. Thérèse believed that Jesus delights in such souls because they allow him to be what he longs to be, Savior, Father, love. They do not compete with grace. They receive it. As this journey ends, let your heart return gently to the essential question: what does Jesus require from a soul that seeks heaven? Not greatness, not perfection, not heroic strength. He requires trust. He requires humility. He requires love. He requires surrender. And all of these are within reach, even now. Saint Thérèse of Lisieux invites you to stop striving upward and begin resting inward, to stop climbing and begin trusting, to stop proving and begin loving. Because heaven is not reached by force, it is entered by love. May your soul walk this little way with peace. May your heart remain small, may your trust remain bold, and may heaven find you already home in the arms of God.